The truth is we're never really in control of anything. And we have the skills and the tools to get through any hardship that comes our way. And what we found in the research is that there is this cross tolerance, that when we do hard things in one realm, we're actually better at accomplishing hard things in other realms.
So many of us have been taught that stress is the villain, but what if the very thing we have been trying so hard to avoid is the thing designed to actually make us stronger? My guest today, Dr. Ingrid Yang, is a physician, a yoga teacher, and a longevity expert who bridges modern medicine with ancient healing. Her philosophy and mantra, blessed to be stressed, completely flips the script on what we think stress really is. Together, we explore how small, intentional challenges like cold plunges, breath work, lifting, fasting, and even some emotional discomfort can actually train our nervous system to handle our lives with more ease. So if you've been feeling tired, stuck, or like your body's betraying you, this conversation will bring you relief, because the truth is your body isn't breaking down, it's trying to adapt. So let's dive in and learn how to work with stress, not against it. So many of us, like I said, are walking around thinking that stress is the enemy, but what if we could insert a really powerful reframe and learn how to work with our stress in a beautiful way and actually maybe feel empowered in those moments where we usually feel frazzled? Ingrid, I'm so excited to bring you on for this conversation. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's so good to see you again. And we had such a connection in Copenhagen. So I'm really happy to connect.
Yes, I loved, I got to hang out with you a little bit at one of the dinners, and then I got to sit through your talk and I loved it. I mean, just the title drew me in. It was called Blessed to be Stressed. And, even on my platform, one of my main messages and the ways that I like to help is to help people, regulate literally in the moments of stress. I always joke, it's like anyone can do yoga on a mountaintop or achieve peace at the beach, but can we get to that state amidst the moments of our life where we actually need to regulate? And then I thought, pairing this message with your message of stress and hormesis is actually a great thing, I think is just, really helpful for the women and the men as we navigate, whether it's our days, our weeks, our lives, knowing that stress is an important aspect of the human experience. And so how do we use that to build resilience, whether in ourselves, in our children? And then how do we use it to kind of reframe and look at these things, like I said, as a blessing, and navigate the best tools that we can so that we can make it through without getting chronically depleted from these things. So I'm really, really looking forward to this conversation. So I want to start, you've got an interesting background. You've lived many lives in your young age, from an attorney to a physician, a strong background in yoga, now leading some epic wellness retreats, which I'm like dying to put on my calendar. So I would love to hear a little bit about that. Like, take us on your journey.
I really started out sort of my adult life in a way where I was like guns blazing, had a lot to prove. And a lot of it revolved around feeling like I was worthy of love. I graduated law school and started working for a corporate firm in New York City and was like, wow, I'm 25 years old and this is all there is for the rest of my life. Like, I don't think this is the way. And interestingly, in college, I'd started practicing some yoga and getting really involved in it. And then I did a yoga teacher training and started teaching yoga during my first year in law school. When I discovered yoga, I was like, wow, I don't have to be anyone different than I am right now. I don't have to prove to anyone that I am worthy of love, because I am exactly as I am, worthy of love and kindness and caring. And that was a whole different philosophy than the way I grew up and the way that I kind of understood my worth as I moved through the world, especially in my 20s. Starting out college being like, I have a mission and this is what's going to happen. And then coming across some barriers and being like, wait, this isn't going to be the straight and narrow journey that you expected it to be. And being like, wait, now what? I thought about what had made me happiest and what had made me feel most fulfilled. And it was teaching yoga. I moved back to North Carolina from New York City, where I was practicing law, and opened a yoga center. So that was like a huge leap of faith, like leaving this very clear sort of square. I know I'm going to have a certain income and I know this is going to be my future and I'll have this kind of security, to like, I guess I'm just going to go put flowers in my hair and try this thing out,
So then you now are a medical doctor. So you pivoted from attorney. It sounds like there's a bridge portal where yoga found you and you're now practicing medicine. So how did medicine find you then?
I always wanted to be a doctor, but I honestly just never felt like I was smart enough. And again, that was that journey of being like, feeling like you're not enough and trying to find ways in which maybe I can be worthy somewhere, somehow. So when I opened my yoga center, it was across the street from Duke Medical Center. And then I would love to read about anatomy and physiology and infuse that into my yoga classes. And a lot of people were like nurses and doctors from Duke Medical Center. And they'd be like, wow, how do you know all this? And I was like, I don't know. I love to read. I would have loved to be a doctor. And they're like, what do you mean you would have loved to? You're 27 years old. Like, why couldn't you be a doctor? I was like, okay, well, maybe I've done a couple of hard things in my life. So maybe I can like try to do a few more hard things to maybe see if this medical thing might be possible. So I took a bunch of pre-med classes, did fairly well, did okay on the MCAT. I applied 3 times and finally got into med school.
Yeah, well, I really, when we zoom out from your incredible story, what I hear that's very relatable to the listener and how many of us tie our sense of worth and our ability to be loved through our productivity, which I hear was, part 1 of your life, and I think many of our lives. And then part 2 is, really with what you're teaching now, I would love to know, how did this journey and these experiences really inform what you teach? Like what I saw you teaching at the Copenhagen Health Week stage. How does this inform what you teach on longevity and chronic stress and the importance of hormesis, but maybe knowing when there is too much stress and we've got to let go and surrender a little bit?
Well, an important part of understanding hormesis. So hormesis is introducing intentional stress into our lives that is controlled and dosed appropriately. We found from the biochemical level can actually make the organism level stronger. But again, there's really an important component of sort of understanding yourself and understanding the degree. Like, I have a friend who does like full Ironman. He does about 3 or 4 a year. And I'm like, it's probably a little over the top. It's probably more than your organism really wants to deal with, right? Like maybe do like 2 half Ironman a year or something, or like ultra marathons is another good example. That's when your body really just tells you like, uncle, I'm done. That's too much, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, we have to challenge ourselves. We can't just be like, okay, well, I'm not going to do an Ironman, so I'm just going to sit on the couch for a week and eat potato chips. Like that's really, there's a balance. But what we found really in the science around hormesis is it is that stressor, but you have to balance it with recovery. And the recovery is really where those like longevity upgrades take place. So you have the stressor and you engage in the stressor and you'll see the biochemical pathways like AMPK, sirtuins. Those will start to really demonstrate like the ways in which our cells become more active, when our mitochondria become more active. But then you have to, on the other end of it, the mitochondria actually has to like achieve biogenesis, and that is achieved in the recovery stage. And so I think an important part that we usually miss when it comes to hormesis and bringing in stressors into our lives and inviting them in is that we have to also remember that recovery from that is equally and essentially important.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit because I think, most of us are living today in chronic stress. So we're constantly living in, we'll just keep using the Ironman as example. Like it's not just the running of a 5K in our life. It's all day high, what I would call high beta. Like our brain waves are just go, 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 do, do, do. And I think a lot of people that try to sit in silence would have the same response you initially did. I got to check my email. Let me go through my to-do list, the grocery list, all the things. So how do we insert in recovery? And more importantly, how do we, like I talk a lot about microdosing recovery. And I'm not talking about microdosing psychedelics here. I'm talking about how can we insert recovery into the micro moments that we actually have accessible. So I think this is a place to talk about, maybe some of your favorite biohacks and how they impact hormesis, because the reality is a lot of these are built around things that we have access to in nature, but we can't always get to that, right? We can't always go watch the sunrise and sunset. That's choice number 1. And then choice number 2, what tool can we insert? And then the second question, I'll remind you if you forget, is how do we do this in the micro moments? What are your favorite go-tos?
A really good example is cold plunging. When I learned about cold plunging, I was like, I'm never doing that. And then of course you end up doing it and you're like, this wasn't terrible. And it
Mhm.
felt good and I feel invigorated. And I've got this like, huge boost of norepinephrine and dopamine. And I mean, you don't think about it that way. You're just like,
Right.
I feel good.
You feel
Whatever
it.
it
You
is.
feel that
It's a
vagus
yoga
nerve
high.
activation, and it feels amazing. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So I think that's like the best example of how to balance, hormesis, which is that cold plunge where, yes, you're getting that like the thrill of all the serotonin and all of the neurotransmitters, but then you're really able to come down a little bit into that like tactile sense of the C afferent fibers, getting that like warmth back into your nerves and your skin.
So these tools really initiate hormesis. They initiate the stress response, the ones that take us out of our comfort zone, particularly cold therapy. And then we've got to add in the recovery piece to help. Essentially, it's like we're creating regulation reps. We're teaching our nervous system, here's a stress, here's a recovery. Remember how this feels so you can recreate it when you go out into the real world and you've got a stressful Zoom meeting and then you need to recover. So there's hormesis that we can choose to create through the tools, through the biohacks that everyone's hearing about nowadays. And then there's the real life application. So again, it's essentially teaching our body and nervous system how to be in a stressful input, which we're designed to, but we're also designed to regulate, which we've kind of forgotten how to do because it's just a chronic high level of stress. Before we move on to the micro moment ways that we can teach our nervous system to do this from your perspective, can you maybe talk about some of the other tools that people are seeing out there a lot? We talked about cold therapy. How about, maybe like the red light or PEMF or what are some of the other contrasts that you really maybe encourage your patients to use? If you're a woman and it feels like your brain has 47 tabs open, you've got the kids asking questions, texts coming in, dinner to make, work to finish, and somehow you're still trying to think clearly, this is not a mindset issue. It is not a personality flaw. This is physiology and your nervous system stuck in urgency mode. I created this urgency reset, a simple 2-minute shift using brainwave-based tools to help your nervous system downshift so you can come back into clarity and presence. Because the goal isn't just managing the chaos, it's being present for the moments that you don't want to miss. So you don't look back later in life and realize the years with the people you love or just your own life slipped by. Click the links. This is a mini masterclass. It's like 15 minutes, and I cannot wait for you guys to check this out. Back to the episode.
So red light and PEMF, I would consider that to be more recovery. I think the number one most important thing will be HIIT training. It's seen time and time again in animal studies and human studies that when we have like bursts of intense not stress, but intense training and intense exercise. And then we have like short bouts of recovery that's extremely beneficial for us from a biochemical level. And again, at the organism level, from like the muscle to the whole body. The other thing is intermittent fasting. And this is like interestingly controversial, even though I don't know why it's controversial, but it's like the most important thing around intermittent fasting isn't the actual timing alone. It's the fact that we're restricting calories. So again, animal studies and human studies show that with calorie restriction, that turns on our longevity pathways. So, again, like there are very specific longevity pathways we see in our NRF2, AMPK, sirtuins, all within the cellular level. And we're finding that all of these really, especially AMPK, is really activated with calorie restriction. That's why a lot of longevity enthusiasts are taking metformin because it turns on the AMPK pathway in the same way that calorie restriction does as well. So really, intermittent fasting, it doesn't have to be that itself. It doesn't have to be like the 10 and 14 10 or whatever, depending on how you want to do it, 16 8. It can just be look at the calories you're taking in. Let's say like for you the daily recommended intake would be 2,000 calories, then decrease that by 15%. Just take in 1,600 1,700 calories and see what happens and whether that can improve your energy, etc. And then I recommend taking a break from it. So you don't have to do the 1,500 calories a day for, the rest of your life. You can do it 5 days a week. And then, the other 2 days you can take in 2,000 calories. But what you'll see is that you will have more energy. You'll have more lean muscle mass, and you'll probably sleep better, to be honest.
Yeah. Okay. I love that. And then we touched just briefly on the red light and the PEMF mat. And I agree, those are more on the recovery side. I'm obsessed with them because I feel like so many people are pushing the stress and not the recovery. So those are tools I talk about to my people all the time. How does someone know whether going to a HIIT class or adding in the cold therapy or the contrast is something that's going to benefit them and maybe help like channel that stress? Or is it something that's going to deplete them?
Yeah, it's a good question. I actually just had a client the other day who I think is in like a chronic high cortisol state. Um, middle-aged man who, is like, suddenly I have a belly and suddenly like I could sleep like for hours and hours and days. And, like what's going on with me? For him, my advice is take a good like 2 to 4 weeks of just rest. So like to really reset yourself. So yeah, like you can go on like light jogs and like long walks and whatnot, but like try to avoid the intense HIIT classes and the cold plunging and the intermittent fasting. Just let your body rest. Like do that equivalent of like laying on the couch and staring at the wall.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you feel if you can for 3 days straight, wake up feeling like you're refreshed from your rest, that's when we can start introducing some hormesis back into your life. Letting your exhaustion and your sleep in some ways gauge and guide your not mood, but your like feeling of activation. I think that could be a really good way to start.
Yeah, I love that. I heard it described too as like a green, a yellow, and a red, essentially like traffic light. And if we're just living in our regular, day-to-day stress, like it's green, go with whatever you want, whatever feels good. Yellow, I think it's around something called the polyvagal theory. It's like if there's, some intense levels of stress and then you're having the regulation in your life, like go ahead, push the hit. And then the red, and I think this was a really good analogy that can hit home with people, is when we've been in too much high load chronic stress. Maybe there's a massive life change, massive relationship change. And this is usually when people would find themselves doom scrolling or getting stuck in bed. And, piggybacking this off what I just heard you say, that would be the person that I think would probably not benefit from a HIIT class or a cold plunge. This person needs to incorporate a lot of just the recovery. Like when you were staring at the ceiling in medical school, your body was just asking recovery, like give me a blank slate, let my nervous system heal before we push it again.
Right. Exactly.
Love
What
that.
I am seeing, honestly, so like the point of the talk in Copenhagen really was how, this resilience, this hormesis begets resilience, which begets longevity. And I think in a lot of ways, and what I'm seeing in myself and my practice of medicine in the hospital is this like sort of depletion of resilience in, society and on the individual level. So, inevitably, unquestionably, in all of our lives, there will be stress. There's no way to avoid stress. And unquestionably, we'll also have health problems at some point in our lives. And what I'm seeing people is that young people and old people are so fearful and they're so anxious. And there aren't really a lot of tools of saying like, I'm going to get through this. I've done hard things. I will continue to do hard things and get through this. And I understand there's inevitably going to be fear and inevitably there's going to be a degree of regression when you're in an environment like a hospital where you can't control anything. But what I try to remind people is the truth is we're never really in control of anything. I know like this sounds like bad, but it's actually reassuring in the sense that the way you are now in the hospital or the way we are now sitting in our offices, it's no different. We're still not really in control of anything. The universe has its plan. The universe is going to figure it out for us. And we have the skills and the tools to get through any hardship that comes our way. And I think that's the part that we're really missing. And that's, I think, in part why when we introduce intentional stressors in our lives, we learn that. We're like, hey, I just hiked this like 3,000-foot mountain. Tomorrow I'm going to do the 4,000-foot mountain because I just did the 3,000-foot mountain, right? And what we found in the research is that there is this cross tolerance that when we do hard things in one realm, we're actually better at accomplishing hard things in other realms. So if I do a cold plunge, maybe I'll be better at doing some intermittent fasting. Or, if I do a HIIT class, maybe I'll be better at, public speaking. So, practicing any kind of challenge can really be beneficial for us in all realms of our lives.
I think this is so applicable too to moms, right? I think we're in a time where we're very much protecting our children and maybe overprotecting. And I've definitely fallen into this. It's like, I want to make their life easy. I want to support them. And part of our jobs as parents is to help build resilience in them. So one of the things we've used in our family, and I'll share it in case someone else wants to take it. I've learned so much from moms sharing their little mantras with me, is that my kids will always know and understand that disappointment is a part of life. And that maybe sounds kind of harsh or whatever, but it's made it way easier for me to say no. It's made it way easier for me to not stress about getting them the coolest Christmas present or Hanukkah present, or like, I want them to know and understand that they will experience disappointment. And I'm going to be next to them through this phase while they're in our home to help them figure out the tools to navigate it, because resilience, disappointment, failure, setbacks are the price of admission for going for anything in life and just waking up and getting through this life. So I love that. I mean, that your talk was really powerful. Okay, well, I want to make sure I touch on any micro moment tools that you have for the hormetic recovery contrast before we hop into menopause, which I'm very excited, perimenopause, as a reinvention of our lives. So what are some like go-to tools? I mean, you said you work 7 days on, 7 days off in the hospital. So I imagine there's times where you've got to walk out of an intense situation, collect yourself quickly. You can't get in the cold plunge and then hop in the sauna. How do you do it in those moments? How do you regulate your nervous system?
So the number one most important way, unquestionably, is breath work. And that's just like, everyone has different things that really resonate with them. But for me, breath work is my number one recovery tool because it's always accessible. And I think at this point, my body's so honed and trained. Like I've done so much breath work in trainings and retreats and learned so many techniques that when I'm stressed, I actually notice I'm like, my body immediately goes into taking some deep diaphragmatic breaths without even consciously doing so. So really, it's unquestionable. Like when you practice a skill, your nervous system integrates it and starts to really utilize it for survival.
Mm-hmm. I love that. That's such a huge piece too. A big takeaway. You're literally training the nervous system. And then so what starts to happen over time, because it learns through consistency and frequency. So these little micro moments make a big difference, is that just like you said, I'm just repeating it because I know sometimes when I'm listening to a podcast, I kind of zone out and zone in. This is a really important one. Eventually what happens is in those tiny moments where you can't get on your puff mat, you can't go to a yoga class or get a massage, your body will tell you exactly what to do because it's almost like you've reprogrammed the hardwiring. So Ingrid goes to her breath. For me, when I'm losing my mind, I go into my body. And so for me, that micro moment might be like literally I push on a wall, or ideally I kick up into a handstand. Like I instantly know what I need. It's like I can't even sit in my work chair anymore. My body's like, here we go, let me regulate. And then you get back in a minute.
And that's, I guess, was my point of when earlier I'd said, like, do the work. I really think it's like you have to practice. Like with anything, recovery is a skill. And you don't suddenly like retire and suddenly you're good at like breath work and meditation and getting massage for yourself once a week. Like it's something that you have to work towards. With anything, it's really a skill that you have to practice and hone. And once we kind of learn what works for us, we can incorporate it into our daily lives.
And by skill, we need to practice and hone. I talk in terms of regulation reps. I'm like, okay, we constantly hear we need to go lift weights. We need to get our protein. I think regulation reps are one of the most important things we do. And these are these small moments of tools that help regulate us. So we build out the toolbox. Maybe it's sound bowl. Maybe it's Reiki. And the more we're exposing ourselves to these things, the more we figure out, okay, this is my macro when I'm like all out of sorts and it's Saturday and I have an hour to go to a class. This is the one. Or it's, okay, I have a heady day. Like, how can I connect with myself today? All right, I work at home. I have a sound bowl now at home and I can do that for a couple minutes.
Exactly. I would say like incorporate something every day in your life that you want to practice at, whether it's meditation or breath work or whatever, whatnot, and then see how that shifts your nervous system. And if it continues to resonate, then you can use it. And then you'll find that your body will just default towards that during those micro breaks, during those micro times where you're like, whoa, I'm really high up in my nervous system. I need something. And your body will just instinctively start doing it.
And I love the word practice because it gives permission to not do it perfectly.
100%.
All right. I have heard you say that menopause is one of the most amazing times to reinvent ourselves. So talk to me a little bit about how you see menopause as a physician.
It's so interesting because what I'll tell you is that recently in the last week, I admitted 2 women to the hospital, both who had like these sort of random symptoms, headaches, sleeplessness, lethargy, almost like stroke-like symptoms, like, an inability to speak initially and then eventually getting there, like sort of we call that dysphagia or dysphagia or aphasia. And after these huge neurological workups from lumbar puncture, MRIs, pan CTs of their spine, CTs of their abdomen, like cancer workups, at the end of it, I was like, are you on HRT? And neither of them were on HRT. This is 2 different patients, 2 different floors, don't know each other. And both of them, I was like, okay, hear me out, because I acknowledge and appreciate like there's something wrong with you neurologically that you're feeling and experiencing in your life. Are you on HRT? They're like, no. And I was like, when did these symptoms start? They're like, maybe like a year or 2 ago. I'm like, when was your last period? And like all these symptoms started when the menopausal transition really took force for them. And I was like, get on some HRT. Both of them were like, oh. They were like, wow, like now that I'm thinking through this is when it all happened. And we could have avoided, like, I'm taking days off of work, I'm in bed all day. And then I'm not sleeping during the night. Like, this makes so much sense. And so it's true that like menopause in a lot of ways can be extremely freeing. Like, the estrogen depletion causes an oxytocin depletion. So in some ways, like, because why do we need to bond with a baby when we're no longer fertile, right?
Right. It all makes sense from an evolutionary perspective.
Right. Consequently, we become way less people pleasers, and we become a lot less willing to say yes to the things we really just don't want to do. And I think that's extremely freeing for many women, including myself, because we just give less shits. And I'm all about that, of being like, you be true to yourself and what you know that you want and need in your heart. So if you don't want to like plan the office holiday party, even though you've done it 6 years in a row because you're depleted and exhausted and there's always drama, don't do it. And then this gives you permission because your hormones aren't like, but everyone needs to like me. So menopause can be really freeing, but at the same time, it can be for many people debilitating and for other people like nothing. So it really, you have to follow your symptoms. Unfortunately, we don't have like one specific blood test that says, okay, you're in menopause, so you need XYZ. You really have to follow your symptoms. And that's, again, when doing the work, knowing yourself, being really in touch is extremely important, because then you say, this is off and it's time for me to make some changes in the direction of maybe considering some HRT, talking to a specialist.
It's so good. I'm so thankful that we're in the time where this is becoming more of the conversation. I'm in perimenopause, just starting to notice some of those fluctuations. I've got friends older than me, younger than me, and I'm watching it all. And I mean, thank God that the conversation has shifted. I think of all of our mothers that didn't have this way to look at it, that this is, an opportunity for more discernment and boundaries, and for us to stand up and say, I'm done. This hasn't felt good my whole life, and now I can't handle it. My nervous system literally will not let me. So yeah, I love that from your perspective as a physician. So Ingrid, we're going to link all your retreats and everything below, and a lot of the tools that we talked about today. And I'm curious, for the woman listening to this who maybe has been feeling, anxious, overwhelmed, tired, depressed, maybe she's chosen the wrong career or path and she's burnt out, but is, scared to take that one brave first step into what lights her up. What advice would you give her? Where to start, or just maybe what inspiring message?
Really, I'm a big fan of mentorship. We all have teachers, and I think about all the teachers in my life that have inspired me. And especially like my meditation teacher, that was a really important thread for my life as I began, in my early 20s. And meditation has been this constant companion for me through all the hard times for the last 20 plus years. And I think about, often how I've come back into my meditation teacher time and time again. with like really complex questions that they really helped guide me. Never like, here's the answer. It's always just like, here's some ways to be curious about it. When you're seeking, when you're looking, I think it is helpful to have some kind of mentorship, even if it's like, I really love this person's podcast and they have subjects that really resonate with me, to like finding a one-on-one coach from, a career or nutritionist or whatever, life coach. I think having a relationship with a teacher can be really life-changing.
I would agree. And I hear community a little bit when I hear that, the importance of community and having someone who's ahead of you in the path that can put a flashlight on yours as you find it, right?
Absolutely.
That person that you can reach out to when things get tricky to remind you, no, that's okay. That's part of it. You're getting closer.
Yeah, very well said.
Yeah, love this. Well, this has been such a great conversation on, not just needing to avoid stress and live in a bubble, but how to integrate it, some tools to help get us through, leaning on community, stepping into what lights us up, and teaching our nervous system how to navigate our lives through grace. And that's, to me, that's the connection code, that's alignment. We're going to link everything below, including the resources, the retreats, my new book on this topic. And Ingrid, thank you so much for being here. This has been a lovely conversation. We'll link your website and where people can find you for more.
Thank you so much.
Self-care needs a rebrand, and that's exactly why I wrote this book, The Connection Code, and it's out now. I'm so excited. I wrote this for the woman who feels like she has lost herself or just simply needs a reminder that everything she's searching for is already inside of her. Inside this book, you're going to find simple, science-backed tools to help you reset in real life moments, like in the carpool line or between back-to-back meetings, or maybe when you catch yourself unfortunately snapping at the people you love most. Pre-order your copy today, and you'll also get access to some amazing freebies to help you start regulating your nervous system and reconnecting with yourself right away.